Hello, everyone. Today we are here to discuss the plethora of questions that you might encounter in your CLAT examination and also during your preparation. I'm sure that you guys might have had your queries regarding that. So, before we start with anything, let's have a blueprint about, what exactly to focus upon. Okay, so as you can see on the screen here, things to keep in mind while solving RC questions. Before we start discussing the different types of questions, let's first focus on what is very, very crucial in order to attempt the questions right. And that is focusing on the main idea, not the facts. What does that mean? It basically means that sometimes they will try to confuse you by bombarding you with tons of facts. But you need to understand what exactly is the writer trying to convey you. And if you have understood what the main idea is, then automatically you will be able to build your thoughts around it. Okay. Then moving on to the next one, read the questions before the passage. That's what we generally do. That's what we tend to tell the students as well. The reason is pretty simple, although this is a very optional step. But the thing is, it definitely works. And in order to make it work, obviously, you will have to give a good deal of 10 to 20 marks to get accustomed to the whole idea. So, coming back to when it comes to long or complex passages, previewing questions really help. What does that mean? Once you have already read the questions and marked your keywords smartly, it will automatically save you a lot of time. Because, first of all, it is priming your brain for what to look for. When you already know the target, as soon as you see the target in the passage, you get your answer, right? So, especially useful for tone, purpose, and inference based questions because you might have seen yourself moving back and forth the passage and the questions, right? But in order to, आप बोल सकते हो abate that habit, that this is something which you can start inculcating in your daily mock practices, in your daily assignment practices, right? So reading the questions, marking your keywords smartly will definitely help you to understand what your focus is, what your target is. Now, eliminate options logically. Now, the thing is, most people are focused on finding the right answer instead of eliminating the other three options because once you have eliminated the three options, you directly come to your answer. Okay, now how do we eliminate? That is the basic question here, right? So, first of all, you can look for extreme language, out of scope, half true, or twisted meaning traps. Of course, they are going to lay down the traps so that you can actually get confused, bamboozled by it. But the thing is, you need to be smarter than that. When you see words like absolutely, solely, primarily, you need to be extremely vigilant that those are your traps. Okay? Then, out of scope, something which is not at all related to the passage, but remotely seems related just because you have read about it somewhere. Obviously, if it does not have, I would say, an evidence in the passage, then how can that be answered? Right? Then we have half true. Half true means sometimes they give you partially true options. So most people, because they are in a jiffy, they read only the partially true options and mark their answers. Please do not be such a person. Okay, that is the most foolish mistake that one can make. Always read your options from head to toe, right? Then we have twisted meaning traps. Basically, they are talking about how they can give you a vocabulary word which can actually put you in a state of daze. Okay, sometimes what happens is they give you a really difficult, maybe a word that you might never have seen before, and that is where you feel stuck. So again, such type of options they need to be dealt with later. Then, moving to, if you're stuck between two options, reread the lines mentioned and go with the less opinionated or more textual one. What does that mean? Wherever you see somebody's opinion being asserted, that means it is something which is taking you away from your right answer. Because opinionated जो होते हैं वो किसी एक person का opinion होता है. Whereas when we are trying to figure out the answers, it has to be relevant to the context, right? Now, beware of trap words, words like always, never, these are known as your extreme words, completely, only, must often make options too absolute. Too absolute का मतलब होता है too extreme, right? और वो extreme options वाले आंसर आपके तभी होते हैं जब passage में भी the writer has used those similar extreme words. So वो chances जो हैं वो बहुत ही कम होते हैं. That's why be extremely careful with that. Then, as you can see, CLAT favors a balanced, moderate, and text supported framework. And that's the reason You need to just rely on the text that has been given to you. Then, tone and attitude questions need emotional reading. What does that mean? It basically means when you are reading something too logically, you kind of, think of it as black and white. But sometimes the writer isn't really thinking in shades of black and white. Probably he's thinking in shades of gray. And in order to understand that, you need to understand the perspective of the writer. ठीक है तो यहाँ पे हम देख सकते हैं observe how the author says things. Is the tone neutral, sarcastic, critical? What does that mean? Neutral means, is it only fact driven? If it is sarcastic, maybe he's talking about something that he doesn't really mean. For example, if you haven't turned up with your homework in the class and your teacher says, "Oh, this is the first time you haven't given the homework." Meanwhile, you already clearly know that you might have missed it one too many times. So that is sarcastic, saying the opposite of what you mean. Critical, when the writer uses biting, harsh remarks, something that is meant to hurt you. That is critical. So, in order to understand that, you need to understand the kind of vocabulary that the writer has been using. And if you can derive that, yes, this is written positively or negatively or neutrally, automatically half of the things kind of automatically get sorted for you, right? So you can look for clues like adjectives, the kind of words, the kind of modifiers they have used, the verbs, the overall mood, and you will be able to extract the tone or the attitude of the writer. And although not many people pay much attention on time, but time is key, and time is something that you do not take for granted. So do not over invest in one passage. Know when to move on in life and in the paper, right? So you have limited time, and if one question seems too tricky, for that time being you can just mark it there. Basically you can mark the confusion, the two options that you're confused between, and move forward, and you can circle back to it once you are done with the entire paper. Do not overstay your welcome. If you stay at one question for too long, automatically you are going to pay the price for it later. ठीक है so prioritize accuracy in easier questions first. जो चीजें naturally तुम्हें समझ में आ रही है after reading the passage, prioritize that first. Now, the kind of questions that you're going to see in your exams. And this is one question which I think you might have seen in your mocks, in your practice assignments, in previous year question papers. Main idea is something which always makes the cut. So main idea can be asked in different formats. For example, what is the primary purpose? What is the main concern? What is the overarching principle? Or what the writer is trying to mean comprehensively. तो अलग अलग तरीके से सेम ही चीज पूछी जा रही है मेन आइडिया. हाउ डू यू टैकल सच टाइप ऑफ क्वेश्चंस? पहली बात तो अपने आप को पूछो, व्हाट्स द पॉइंट ऑफ द एंटायर पैसेज? दैट मीन्स व्हाई हैज द राइटर रिटन दिस पैसेज? कुछ तो कन्वे करना चाह रहा होगा वो, राइट? And avoid answer choices that are too specific, too narrow, or too factual. Now remember, too specific ka matlab hai, suppose they have picked the line directly from the passage. Just because you have seen it in the passage doesn't make it the main idea. Be more smart. Okay? Then after that, too narrow. Narrow ka matlab hota hai something which only covers half of the things. For example, if the passage is talking about the social, cultural, economical, financial, basically status of a country, and in the option you only see the social aspect of it. Automatically, this is a narrowed down option. तो एक ही चीज बताई गई है उस ऑप्शन में. ऐसा ऑप्शन भले ही तुम्हें ऐसा लगे कि ओ आई हैव सीन इट इन द पैसेज, बट इट डजंट कैप्चर द होल आइडिया ऑफ व्हाट द पैसेज स्पीक्स ऑफ, राइट? Then pick the option that summarizes the entire passage. So, something that covers all the paragraphs of a passage wonderfully well is basically your main idea. सबसे पहले identify the topic and identify what has been spoken about the topic in a recurring fashion. क्योंकि main idea जो होता है वो आपको हर paragraph में मिल जाता है. ठीक है? That's why it's important that you read the passage thoroughly and carefully. Then, moving on to another very heavy topic, which is inference. Now, the thing is, inferential questions, even main idea is a part of inference, even tone is a part of inference. कैन बी इन्फर्ड, कान बी इन्फर्ड, ये तो है ही है इन्फेरेंस के क्वेश्चंस। बट इन्फेरेंस होता क्या है? समथिंग विच इज इनडायरेक्टली implied. The writer is going to provide you the hints, but it is up to you what you make out of those details. Okay, that is an inference. So how do you tackle it? You सबसे पहले तो you will look for what is suggested but not directly stated. Obviously, inference is implicitly given, right? Now stick strictly to the passage, no outside knowledge, because sometimes they will intentionally give you an option which might not be in the passage but is related to the topic, just to confuse you. ठीक है? तो वहां पे you need to be very careful, stick strictly to what is given in the passage, avoid extreme or absolute answers. Again, be very careful of extreme options. And an extra pro tip here is, if you cannot prove it with evidence from the text, then don't pick it. ठीक है? Inference is something which can always be circled back and found in the passage. तो एक चीज बहुत क्लियर है कि उसका कुछ ना कुछ एविडेंस आपको पैसेज में मिलना चाहिए। ठीक है? भले ही आप बोल सकते हो कि एक अलग तरीके से पैसेज में दिया रहेगा वो, they will not be using the exact same words that they have used in the option, but that's the whole point of an inferential question, isn't it? Then tone, attitude, purpose questions. Again, tone is a very important topic, high priority. Although it might not have been seen that frequently in the last 2 years, but it is something that will definitely make a comeback because it is a very, very crucial topic. Now, when we talk about tone and attitude, it basically means the feelings, the sentiments of a writer towards a subject matter. Okay. A writer might feel anger towards a subject. For example, if we are talking about the warlike situations which have propped up currently, उसके बारे में हो सकता है he has a lot of anguish or anger. And that could be the tone of the passage. Sometimes frustration can be seen in the writer's words. Sometimes happiness or sorrow can also be seen. So these are all different tones. सबसे पहले तो हाउ डू यू टैकल इट? स्पॉट द इमोशन और इंटेंट. अगर आपने इमोशन को पकड़ लिया, इसका मतलब है यू हैव ऑलरेडी वन दिस वॉर. ओके, तो इज द ऑथर क्रिटिसाइजिंग? Is he just simply explaining a process? Is he praising somebody? Is he giving you a warning? Because अगर criticizing है तो critical tone है, explaining है तो informational tone है, praising है तो it could be laudatory or acclamation. Warning is cautionary or something which is alarming. तो ये तुम्हें पकड़ना बहुत जरूरी है कि what exactly is the writer trying to convey? What are his feelings about a particular subject matter? टोन वर्ड्स टू वॉच फॉर, न्यूट्रल, sarcastic, ये बहुत कॉमनली सीन टोन्स हैं, ये आपको ज्यादातर दिखती रहेंगी. न्यूट्रल का मतलब होता है when the writer isn't taking any sides. Skeptical is when he's doubtful about something. Then we have optimistic, means he's being very, very positive about a particular thing. He's hopeful about the future. So these are some commonly seen tones, but obviously there's a long list of tones that you need to start working upon. Okay. Then, vocabulary, as you can see, is something which is very, very imperative to understanding. If somebody has a good, आप बोल सकते हो, good vocabulary bank, automatically they have an upper hand, right, over everybody else. So as you can see, meanings of words and phrases. Now, this is something which is a very consistent process and something that you need to inculcate over time. Vocabulary is something that doesn't come naturally, first of all. So you need to work extra hard to attain a decent vocabulary bank. Now, when you talk about vocabulary and vocabulary questions, they can ask you synonyms, antonyms. They can just pick a word from the passage and ask you the synonyms and antonyms. Basically, what you need to do is, हमेशा आपको हर word का meaning तो नहीं पता होगा. But you can definitely derive the contextual meaning of a word. And how do we derive the contextual meaning? By reading the line before and after the line in which the word is given. तो automatically एक चीज समझ में आएगी कि whether the writer is talking about something in a positive, negative, or neutral way. Then, plug the answer choices back into the passage to see which one fits naturally. You've got 4 options. Out of that, अगर तुम्हें ये पता चल गया कि the tone of the writer is positive, तो automatically अगर 2 negative options दिख रहे हैं तो वो वैसे ही eliminate हो जाते हैं. And then you can just simply substitute which one fits better. ठीक है? This might work for 70-80% of the time, so you can start practicing that. Okay? Then we have author's argument or viewpoint. Now, the thing is, sometimes the writer is being very, very clear and sharp about his objective, but sometimes he simply is talking about a topic as a spectator. Now, first of all, you need to identify whether the writer has provided an argument at all. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे हम देख सकते हैं कि what stand is the author taking on an issue? Is he in favor of, against, or neutral? ठीक है, related to the topic. Now, you need to understand and identify the opinion words. Opinion words का मतलब है, again, if you see the writer using should, must, unfortunately, obviously, these are also known as transition words. And you can also be really, really aware of conjunctions. When you move from, a single thought, and suddenly the writer uses something like however or moreover to provide you extra information. That means he's changing the tack. तो ये सारे ट्रांजिशन वर्ड्स जो होते हैं उनसे एक्स्ट्रा केयरफुल रहने की जरूरत है. उनको बेसिकली पुट इट इन अ बॉक्स सो दैट यू आर एक्सट्रीमली केयरफुल व्हेन यू टैकल दीज टाइप ऑफ वर्ड्स. And track where the author's bias or judgment peeks through. Sometimes the writer does not really provide a judgment, so that is a neutral or factual or data driven passage. But when the writer has clearly stated his opinion, that means he's taking sides. That means you need to understand whether he's in favor or against the topic. Okay? Then, you might have seen multiple times strengthen and weaken questions. सबसे पहले तो strengthen and weaken का concept समझ लो. So if we are to strengthen the writer's argument, first we need to identify the writer's argument. Now there are rarely chances when the question itself speaks of the writer's argument. और अगर आप उतने lucky हो कि आपको writer's argument question में ही मिल गया है, तो automatically things become easy. But अगर वो नहीं दिया हुआ है आपको राइटर का आर्ग्यूमेंट, तो आप ही को आइडेंटिफाई करना पड़ेगा. तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल आइडेंटिफाई व्हाट द राइटर स्टैंड्स फॉर, एंड सेकंड identify the option that best supports the writer's argument. On the other hand, when we talk about weakening the writer's argument, again, identify the writer's argument and basically find an option which goes opposite of the writer's argument. For example, if the writer is saying that the sun rises from the east, and if you are supposed to weaken it, so basically you are supposed to prove that the sun does not rise from east, or it rises from west, maybe. So this is what you are supposed to prove in order to weaken his argument. I was just giving an example. The sun doesn't really rise from the west. We all know that, right? So as you can see, focus on the core argument in the passage. A good strengthener adds support. It will solidify the positioning of that argument. And a good weakener questions a key assumption. और अगर आपको उसे वीकन करना है तो आपको बेसिकली क्वेश्चन करना पड़ेगा पूरे पैसेज का जो एक की अजम्पशन है उसको. ठीक है. Eliminate choices that are irrelevant or out of scope, especially in strengthen weaken argument. आपको ऐसे out of scope options मिलने के chances ज़्यादा होते हैं. तो सबसे पहले तो उनको eliminate कर दो. Basically minimize the noise and focus on the target, right? So that's pretty much it. As you can see, one last question. Application analogy based questions. Analogy is basically using a similar example to make you understand the topic better. Now, as you can see, सबसे पहले हमें क्या देखने को मिलता है? Would the author agree with this? Would this example work similarly? So if you are to provide the application of a particular argument, or if you are to provide an analogy that means a similar example, then you need to understand that the writer should agree with it. So writer's agreement is directly going to take you to the right answer. ठीक है, तो तुम अपने आप से क्वेश्चन पूछो कि क्या राइटर इस बात से अग्री करेगा, इन चारों ऑप्शंस में से किससे वो बेस्ट अग्री करेगा, और जो मिल गया वही आपका आंसर है. So match logic, not just content. Just because you can see one of the options in the passage does not make it the correct answer. Okay? You need to understand what the question is asking of you. Because जब तक question ही interpret नहीं होगा तब तक answer कहाँ से होगा? Many people and many students have the habit of focusing on the passage more, focusing on the options more, but you have to be wiser than that. If you do not interpret the question well, you won't be able to find out the correct answer. So you need to know the crux, what exactly the question is trying to seek here. Okay? And yes, as you can see, that's pretty much it from my side. And I hope you can see this slide. We've got a flat 15% off on online classroom programs. So if anybody is interested, they can definitely enroll themselves. And yes, that's it from my side, guys. Thank you so much. I hope the session was useful to you. Do let me know if there's something that you would want to know in the comment section, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye. Thank you so much.